April 1st is a deadline for the Ukrainian civil servants and politicians to file their asset declaration. According to the new law, anti-corruption activists and international members of the supervisory boards of state-owned enterprises are among those who have to go through this burdensome process intended to hold the government officials accountable. Such practices for civil society sectors don't exist in the West. Over the past year, President Poroshenko promised to cancel this law several times, but has failed to do so. So we have with us Sasha Drik, the head of the Declarations Under Control Civil Watchdog, and Oleksandr Kalitenko, Senior Analyst at Transparency International Ukraine, to make sense of this and understand what we do next with this. Hi, welcome you in the studio. So what it all means, in the end, what does it mean that the law had been cancelled? And we all, I understand, declared our assets.
Well, yes, basically, yes, we all declared our assets, and what is going to happen now, the Parliament will most probably cancel this law and this obligation that basically obliges us, the anti-corruption activists, to declare, but it doesn't mean that we didn't have to submit our declarations by the 1st of April, as was required by the law. Basically, the situation that we have faced now is that nearly half of the entire country can be subject to prosecution for not filing or filing some incorrect information that was not even possible to file in this declaration because of this law. And basically what this means is that the Parliament and the President, who promised to cancel the law but never happened, is basically going after the civil society and specifically the anti-corruption activists. This is what is happening, and this is what this law is about.
Oleksandr, there couldn't be more appeals from foreign organizations, donors, international organizations like Transparency International, and all high-level politicians dealing with Ukraine, like the EU Commissioner Hahn, who kind of demanded to cancel the law. How we can read the fact that it had never been done within this year?
Actually, this is the issue that Ukrainian government and Ukrainian power authority demonstrated. We saw the latest statement from our European partners, for example, about the verification process of declaration, because what should happen next, the verification of these declarations. And we saw the statement that NACP invited experts to analyze this process of verification and to issue some recommendation how to improve these business processes made by NACP. And then we saw that almost nothing of these recommendations could implemented by the NACP. NACP just failed to do so.
And Oleksandr, and the question to both of you, what you do next? Have you declared your assets and the members of your organization, as there is also discussion that this law is discriminatory? There would be organization which will sue the government or something. And there was a question like, among the activists, should we follow the law which by the principle is discriminatory? I know there was kind of the debate. What is your point? And
there was an extensive debate actually between the anti-corruption NGOs and anti-corruption activists whether to declare or not. The decision that has been taken is that basically every person has to decide for himself. And obviously we cannot tell those who work for our organizations either to declare or not, because there is no unanimous position as of now. But what we can do, we can appeal that this obligation is not constitutional, which was the case from the very beginning. And this is why we have prepared a constitutional appeal to the Constitutional Court of Ukraine and asking the court to rule these provisions not constitutional. This is what should be done, and this is what we as a civil society are going to do. Obviously, while the Constitutional Court is or will be considering this appeal, the law will still be in action, and given the situation with the Constitutional Court of Ukraine, it might take years. We have to understand this. It doesn't mean, though, that we don't have to do it, because we understand that this is, we need to obey the law, and this is what the law says. We need to file this appeal, and ask for the Constitutional Court to rule it not constitutional, because it does violate a certain number of provisions of the Constitution of Ukraine. However, there are already some statements by the head of the parliament, Mr. Parubi, who says that he will put it on vote the very first question as soon as the parliament...
After the deadline.
Exactly, after the deadline. It doesn't change anything for us who had to declare our assets before the 1st of April, but it shows basically the true aim of this decision of the parliament and why it has never been cancelled before the deadline. Basically, we say that it's the SBU, the Security Service of Ukraine, who will now collect this database of all activists, so that it makes it easier for them to go after the specific particular activists after this deadline.
There would be the question, somehow some would claim that the anti-corruption activists in the civil society didn't manage to prove, to argue in front of the public that this law isn't really legitimate, that what makes them different, from the civil servants, like if you fight corruption, please prove that you are also clean yourself. So my question would be rather, what do you say to that idea that anti-corruption activists were kind of waiting till the West would pressure the government, would pressure the president, and they would cancel the law, instead of really campaigning with the people, really kind of trying to work with MPs to make it happen, rather than kind of wait till maybe by the last day of the deadline this law would be cancelled. What would you say on that?
It is hard to say, because we saw the very strange position of our government and lots of promises during whole the year about the cancelling of this law, and we saw it now again, and as Oleksandr said, the first day on the new plenary session as well. But the anti-corruption activists, just like you said, they do not have access to the budget money. That's why it differs from the state officials, for example, and they do not have authority to provide some obligatory decision made by state, for example. That is the huge decision.
So what do you do next?
Well, as I said, we are going to file the appeal to the Constitutional Court. This is something that has to be done. But what is more important about this declaration and this obligation is that, and why we did not pay that much attention to this issue, as you said, basically it takes a lot of time and energy to do something that we do on a daily basis, when trying to protect the legislation, when trying to force the anti-corruption institution to work. And all what has been happening with the attacks on anti-corruption civil society, and what is going to follow probably, is that we will be forced to spend 80% of our time trying to defend ourselves instead of doing our job. I mean, doing what we have created our NGOs for fighting against corruption. And this was the aim of this legislation, and this is what is probably going to happen after the deadline. So what we have to do now is to basically make sure that we don't distract ourselves from doing what we have been doing all this time, fighting against corruption and pressing the fighting against corruption in the parliament, in the government, and law enforcement.
Have you heard about the cases when some of the members of the boards had left their organization or something? What kind of complication this already had made?
Timofey Milovanov already posted on the Facebook.
The head of the Kiev...
the head of Kiev School of Economics.
School of Economics, yeah.
Yes, and this is the huge problem, because this is not
So he posted what? That the...
he posted that some board members are forced to actually decline their position. And this is not about only anti-corruption activists. This is also about the internationals, non-residents, in the boards of the state, for example, state enterprises. Because there are no English form, for example, in the register to fill it. it. There are no further explanation made by NACP, for example, how to get electronic digital signature to submit this e-declaration for them. And there are lots of obligations that that should not apply to the non-residents because they are not citizens even of Ukraine.
I should also say that we at Hromadske are eligible for this law. It could be discussed, but as well, 40 members of the team, the general gathering members, the supervisory board, all kind of boards had to declare because we had one of the projects connected to journalistic investigation. That's much as you, that is enough to be sometimes subjected to this law, though there is a discussion between the lawyers. And yes, it takes a lot of time of our team, and instead of doing the investigations, we exactly were busy with all that things, though we declare it during all the kind of the documents we send to our donors and the audience. So thanks a lot for this. We will follow the story. We won't let it be forgotten. That was Sasha Drik, who is representing the Declaration Under Control Civic Watchdog, and Oleksandr Kalitenko, who is a Senior Analyst at Transparency International Ukraine. And I'll be back in a second. You can find the full stories and the full interviews on our webpage, en.hromadske.ua. Also sign up for our brand new newsletter if you would like to receive Hromadske International weekly highlights. The sign-up box is on the upper right-hand side of the site. As well, follow us on Twitter and Facebook and search Hromadske International.